Que paso, fans of cinema? You got Jaime and Fuego here for the horror show. That's right, that's where when I'm not on Enfuegotainment, I'm always covering the most spectacular entertainment with an edge. And so, as you see, with this glorious bookshelf that is seated beside me, Stephen King is my favorite author of all time. And so all of this stuff goes back to when I was a very small child, and I'm just going to give you a small bit of history about why you should read Stephen King. And so his miniseries, they jumped into my brain as a small child. I saw stuff like It, and then in turn I saw The Stand, and that's the one that resonated with me the most as a child because of the fact that I was raised Reformed Baptist, that's right, a subsect of a subsect of a subsect, and so gotta tell you, it was it just resounded for the sheer fact that not only did you have a spiritual presence, you had the good, you had the evil, but it also seemed very plausible. And so the terror also in It, which is another one of King's most iconic stories. I mean, those two especially, along with Pet Sematary later on, and then, you know, Salem's Lot and various others. I mean, the man has written upwards of like 50, 60 plus books. I mean, and that's not even including short stories and essays and just all kinds of other amazing things. And so the big kicker for me as far as loving Stephen King goes is, even though I saw all those miniseries and things as a kid, as I got older I decided I finally wanted to read Stephen King because I wasn't as much of a reader as a child. I was into sports and, you know, watching movies and stuff like that. But when I decided I wanted to finally read El Rey, the King, kind of just was like, okay, let's pick my favorites first. Let's do The Stand, let's do It, let's do Pet Sematary. And Pet Sematary was the first that I ever read, and then I jumped on to, you know, the story about Randall Flagg and Underwood and Mother Abigail and The Stand and all that, and then eventually It. But the biggest thing that really changed the course was the fact that I learned through research that as Stephen King's career progressed, everything, including The Stand and It and so many other iconic releases of his, tied into his magnum opus. And his magnum opus is right here on my shirt. The Dark Tower, guys, damn right. The seemingly unending journey of Roland Deschain after the tower, trying to find where all of those roses are so beautifully growing around this ominous tower that pretty much holds all of the fibers of all of reality together. We're not just talking our reality, we're talking every infinite reality, every alternate dimension that in his mind exists, and we've seen that in the comic book community, you know, DC and Marvel and various others with all their, oh, there's this dimension, and then there's this reality, and there's Superman in this, you know, Elseworlds incarnation. And so it's kind of crazy, but it seems to be pretty commonplace in so much fantasy and, you know, sci-fi and horror and stuff like that in comic books, obviously. So when I found out that the Dark Tower holds everything together and in turn holds so many characters together, bringing ones that you had seen before back into just the Stephen King universe, so to speak, I decided, and this was over 5 years ago, after reading Pet Sematary and It and The Stand, that I had to start from the very beginning. I had to start with Carrie, and I had to go book by book, release by release, and read everything that Stephen King had done in its properly published order. And so, why do I love Stephen King so much? Well, you know, besides the fact that he is incredibly creative, he loves that classic era of horror from, you know, the Poes and the Lovecrafts and stuff like that, but yet he gave it a modern twist because he was also influenced by the Universal Monsters and the drive-in films. Horror that is serious, but yet doesn't take itself too seriously, because when life is too serious, how enjoyable is it, my friends, you know? Sometimes, not so much. I think you need to have fun. Life is about enjoying yourself, and really, I mean, it's about working hard as well, you know, and King put incredible amounts of hard work into creating this stuff, but, you know, it's also about enjoying yourself. And so I wanted to enjoy myself by engaging in every bit of this very meticulous, very detail-driven writing that King is notable for. Man is a Virgo, much like myself. You know, I'm actually born a day before my favorite writer. He's on the 21st and I'm on the 20th. As Virgos, we are detail-driven, and we like to really flesh things out. We like everything, as Radiohead would say, in its right place. And so King, sometimes to his detriment, he overdoes fleshing that stuff out. Maybe he overthinks characters. Maybe he just gives them a little more attention than is necessary. But they always feel like real people compared to what so many other authors are just not so good at doing. So yeah, guys, over the last 5+ years, that's right, I've slowly worked from Carrie, to Salem's Lot, to The Shining. I mean, Night Shift was his amazing first collection. The Stand we talked about. The Dead Zone, Firestarter, Cujo was great. Pet Sematary, one of my absolute favorites. The Talisman, one of his first forays into something more fantasy and, just different. And the list goes on, the decades go on. We are here in the 2010s, 2016, and King has another book. The fun thing about this is that so much ties into the Dark Tower. You know, whether it's bringing Randall Flagg back, who had been previously seen in The Stand and in Eyes of the Dragon, or whether it's bringing back somebody like Father Callahan, which is, as many of you know, I'm Jaime Fuego, but my last name, shh, keep quiet. It's actually Callahan, and so seeing him come back in, Dark Tower 5 and 6 was so rad, and it was really cool to see all of the small little Easter eggs and just little hints, nods, and references to previous works, but then also when you had ginormous tie-in stuff like, for instance, Black House or Hearts of Atlantis, when you hear about the Low Men and different stuff like that. They even ended up bringing back Brodigan, which was cool, even though it was not in some of my favorite bits of the Dark Tower. So I love Stephen King because much like all of the geek stuff that I love in the comic book universe, he is great at world building, universe building in this case. And so with less than 10 books now, from short story collections and novels and all that other stuff to go until I'm finally all the way caught up through all of his books, I have to say it has been so fun, it has been so fulfilling, and it's kind of cool to just see how much he thought things out and how intertwined everything is. But even more so, the fact that the man is still at it, he is still taking that stuff into consideration. I mean, hell, he just put out a sequel to The Shining, called Dr. Sleep just a few years ago. He won the Bram Stoker Award. The guy is still doing tremendous work to this day, and some of his later stuff, like Doohickey and Cell, I even think stands on par and maybe even shoulders above with other things he put out in the 90s, where I feel like he was kind of looking for his voice at times, and then after his accident where he's like, I have to finish The Dark Tower, I don't know if I'm going to write anymore after that. I love Stephen King for the sheer fact that he is humble, he is brilliant, and he's also a very, in a lot of ways, similarly tortured person to me, from trying to put certain vices out of your life and keep them in check to, the darkness that dwells within all of our hearts. And for every Pennywise or, Barlow or whatever it may be that he puts in his books, Randall Flagg, there's a Crimson King, there is always some real person that has darkness far scarier inside their own hearts. And as a horror fan, for me, some of the scariest films and books and whatever are where there's nothing fantastical or supernatural transpiring. It's because of the fact that darkness that dwells within the human heart, the real stuff, the stuff that we see, on a day-to-day basis and, read about in, the New York Times or see on CNN, that stuff can be even scarier a lot of the time. So for that reason, I encourage all of you to read Stephen King, guys. I mean, whether it's just a adaptation on screen that you saw previously that interests you, 11/22/63, that Hulu is doing, is tremendous, or whether you've just always been kind of, curious about that guy from Maine who writes all the dark stories and stuff like that that you probably don't even know very much about. I highly recommend him. Is he the greatest author that has ever lived? No, that's probably Dickens or, somebody else whose name is eluding me at the moment, but is he my favorite author? Is he the author that continually entertains me and on a person-to-person level speaks to this constant reader in a way that nobody else could? Yeah. Stephen King is my favorite author, and for that reason, I encourage all of you to read his stuff. So, once again, I've been Jaime Fuego. That is my Stephen King story. I'm almost done with going through all of these books. It has been a journey that has spanned years of dedication at this point, but where would I be without that? I probably wouldn't be as much of a horror fan. I wouldn't be as much of a fan of literature, because one thing that King does wonderfully, he gives credit where it's due, whether it's people who were filmmakers, authors, whatever they may be, those who have given him the inspiration and the influence, he always gives them credit. He always pays reverence. He always gives the homage properly. And so that's why I am sitting here doing it for him. So once again, Jaime en Fuego, 'tis I am always covering the spooktacular on the horror show. I once again extend that grande gracias, and until I get to talk more Stephen King with you, because I have some ongoing coverage of his that is very excited for the third entry, End of Watch, in the Mr. Mercedes and Finders Keepers series. That's what King's got for 2016, and I do hope and pray that he has many, many more years of captivating all of us ahead. So, and yeah guys, the coolest thing for me is that I'm going to be doing an upcoming segment spotlighting my 5 favorite, that's right, the top 5 Stephen King countdown, yep, from Infuegotainment and the horror show. Nice co-production, so you can look forward to that coming from me, one of the world's biggest Stephen King fans, very soon.